Hi everyone, my name is Joel Kleber from Jim's Group, and we're here for chapter 2 of the Jim's book discussion with Jim himself. We're going to go a lot more in detail behind the book and ask some questions. So we hope you enjoyed chapter 1, and make sure you subscribe or comment, like the content, and let us know how it's going. So Jim, The Accidental Gardener is the title of chapter 2. However, that title is a little bit misleading because there's a lot of your university. It starts when you actually finish high school, and you said with jubilation you're done with high school.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So
greatest day of my, not quite the greatest day, one of the greatest days of my life, actually seeing I'll never have to go back to school again. I did not like school.
Now after that, you did a gap year, which I don't think a lot of people know. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, the first thing I did is I went on and worked on a farm in Western Australia for 4 months.
Now, when you say farm, where in WA? Because it's a pretty big place.
About 100 miles north of Perth.
North of Perth, right.
So it was a place called Wailabing.
Okay, yep.
And it was a wool and wheat farm. And I was just doing everything around the farm, which was, I used to ride a horse a bit. I herded stock. We got involved in drenching and just cleared paddocks of rocks, helped with fence mending, all kinds of stuff like that. It was just a really fun job. Paid $18 per week plus keeps, so it wasn't exactly lucrative. Biggest problem was very lonely, and I was foolishly didn't take enough books there. I remember reading the cardboard boxes. I'd read the signs on it. I was so desperate for reading because I was such an avid reader. And then I got my mother sent me some books. But it was very, very isolating, even for an introvert like me, but a very fun job.
And something else interesting happened during that time, which is where you got your name. Do you tell about that?
Yes, well, the guy I worked with, it was a number of brothers and a sister who were there that worked on the farm. And the guy I worked with was a bloke about 40. And he had a son about my age called David. So I said, and he was a bit confused and said, "Oh, call me Jim."
Call you Jim. So there we go. There's the origin of the name Jim.
Yeah. Basically that. It was kind of because it was a way of breaking out of home too. David to me had a sort of a, I don't know what you call it, name, but Jim was macho.
Probably suited what you were doing at the time, wasn't you? On a horseback, you were doing a lot of farm work, all that sort of stuff, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it was just wanting to break with the past. It was just being. Jim is very Australian, very sort of a bit rugged, a bit masculine, and you're kind of trying to break out and become that kind of guy instead of being. Because I was a nerdy bookworm, So it was the macho thing.
So it's almost like it's used as a time to sort of maybe would you say reinvent yourself, like your image almost in a way.
Well, at least internally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just it was my middle name, you see. But I could have shortened David to Dave. That would have been also pretty Aussie. But Dave had a sort of a.
I don't know, Dave's mowing, it just doesn't work.
Had a sort of a Daggy sound to it somehow, Daggy Dave. So I used to call Daggy Dave at school sometimes.
Right.
I wasn't always that popular. So yeah, Jim just come across all right, and a different name. So yeah, I adopted it. My mother was a bit taken aback by the whole thing. She still called me David till the day she died, of course.
Just refused to call you Jim?
No, she didn't refuse. She
right.
started actually get used to it. My mum wasn't stubborn, but she, you've called somebody David since they were, born. So she always. But no, I said that's okay, Mum. And I used to it. My relatives tend to call me David too, so I don't mind.
Well, it's a good choice of name you made there, Jim, and it's one of the most popular names. Franchising it.
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't expect anything like this. That's for sure.
So you were there for around 4 months. So why was it? It's not a short time to do that sort of work. It's pretty tough. It can be a bit of a culture shock where you came from Melbourne, but you were there for only 4 months.
No, it was just good. I liked it. I mean, It was just I like working. I like the outdoors. I always liked the outdoors, and just doing stuff. I learned to drive. My father gave me a few lessons before I went away, but I drove every day on the farm, of course. So by the time I came back up, it was easy. There's no 120 hours in those days, so I just went and got my license almost straight away. So it was a really, really interesting time, and I had a lot of respect for farmers. I just think they're great people. It's a great lifestyle. It's very tough, but they're amazingly resourceful. They're amazingly capable. They do so many different jobs. They were just really impressive people.
And you said it was a sheep and wheat farm, was it?
Yeah.
Did you ever shear a sheep or?
No. They because they had the shearers come in.
Right.
I was staying in the shearers' quarters actually.
Okay, would have been some rough blokes in there.
No, not when they were there actually,
right.
Because when they came in, they'd take the whole thing up,
okay.
and then I just went and stayed with this guy that I was working with in his house, which was just across the road and stuff. But the shearers came in. They're a pretty rough lot. The mattresses get a bit stained because some of them would get drunk and they wouldn't, go to the toilet in the night and stuff of that nature. They were, I remember some very inventive swear words coming out of their shearing shed during the shearing time.
I can imagine they're very hard. They're very hard men shearers.
They're a tough crew.
They are very tough crew. Very, very tough crew. So you're there for around 4 months, and after that you came back to Melbourne. So you've come back to Melbourne. You're going, right, what am I going to do? What was your first job when you came back to Melbourne?
Well, I saw this really good-looking sounding ad to be the assistant to the manager of an international company. So that sounds pretty good. I'll have a go at that one. And I applied, and I found it was selling encyclopedias. So
yeah, that's not a bad way to suck you in with that. This job.
So actually, the first time I saw that, I thought, well, I don't want that. But then after a while, when I wasn't finding anything, I said, okay, I'll give it a go. So I went out and I spent 2 weeks trying to sell encyclopedias door to door, which I was a complete and utter failure at. I was absolutely miserably bad at it, and it was an awful job. Very, very hard to get knocked back. So not much of a natural salesperson. That's something that had convinced me right from an early stage. I had another go at doing something similar, actually. I was selling on the phone, trying to sell people on a painting service. But I just at that time was reading Exodus by Leon Uris about which exposed me to the first time to the horrors of the Holocaust, and I got so depressed and upset by that. I was just in a terrible funk. I remember wandering around the house just in a daze, listening to this appalling story, reading this appalling story, and I just lost the job. I couldn't cope. Mm-hmm. It's the only time in my life I've just completely fallen apart emotionally. Mm.
Now, during that time when you were doing the encyclopedias, you were also gardening still? You're doing a couple of lawns here and there?
No, I wasn't actually.
Okay.
I wasn't at all. I had gardened up to the time I was about 14 when we left Adelaide. Mm. And then we went to Sydney for a year, and I was 3 years in Melbourne. I hadn't done any gardening in that time. So what I actually did after this experience is I thought I'd try doing some gardening, start a gardening business. So I got a poster, a sort of a note, and I asked the local hardware store if I could put it in his window. And it was rather large, actually. He said, you really should give me something smaller. So I put it in the window at a place where like when the door was shut, there was nothing inside. So he did that, and I got about 3 customers come out of that. And I was charging like $1.50 an hour, which when you're making $18 a week seems quite decent money. And so I just did. I didn't take off to any great degree, but again, I like gardening. You see, I just like being outside. I always have that. So that was kind of a beginning, but that wasn't going to make me a living, and I really didn't have any strong sense. So I actually applied I applied to join the post office. But as soon as they heard I was interested in going to university, they said, "Well, no, not really. We'd take you happily, but not with that. Not intend to stick around." And then I applied to join public service. Mm. And I went to work for the Department of Civil Aviation for about 6 months, which was very enlightening.
I found it quite interesting because I was reading it again last night. I was making me notes, and it was. I think you were once told to look busy whilst the inspector was coming. Then the rest of the time you could slack off, and you just had this utter disdain for everyone trying slacking off in the office all the time, and you had nothing to do. And
I used to find it very, very annoying and demoralising. I had like half my time occupied remotely, and I wasn't that efficient in those days anyway, in terms of the work I had to do, and then I was working one day a week, helping the guy did the publications, and they said, "Oh, we want to promote this guy, so we want to make you a full-time assistant." You've got to be joking. I haven't got enough to do anyway. It was so slack. It was so lazy. It was so, you could do absolutely nothing and you just keep your job forever. It really taught me what public administration is like. I remember talking to a guy who was a minister in the Whitlam government later and about the situation and what I experienced. He said, as far as I knew, everybody was flat out all the time. And I said, well, you wouldn't really know, would you? Mm.
And was that important experience for you in regards to how you run your company today, do you think?
Well, I knew I didn't want my company like the public service, that's for sure.
No, but I mean in terms of like you want everyone you have people that have just had a lot of life.
Instinct. It was just my sense. I just found it offensive. I'm not the kind of person that wants to slacken off and just do nothing. Mm. I mean, I don't work hard really, but I work very ferociously. I work very concentrated. You know yourself. If you want something done, like written, I'll usually have it written in an hour or two. I just do it. So I just have that habit of mind of wanting to be productive and do things in the most efficient way possible. I want to look at my emails. I look at doing this one, then this one, this one. Don't read things twice and just be totally efficient. It just offended me to be in a situation where, even if you dawdle, you wouldn't take up half your time. And I just saw the wastefulness of it, the stupidity of the systems. I reckon every job I did with a bit of automation could have been done in about 10 minutes. It was just the whole week. It was just crazy.
Now, you came to that job with that attitude. Where did that attitude develop, you reckon? Was it something you learned from your parents, or was it just something you reckon innate in you? Or
I don't know. Maybe my parents, maybe whatever. It's just part of me. I just can't, no matter what I do, I have to do it in the most efficient way possible. Even when I'm doing the dishwasher, I always am in a situation where I can sort of take the glasses and pivot on my heel and put them in like that, so I don't waste a second. I just always think that way. I'm not hard working since working 100 hours a week, but I just always have to be efficient in what I do. It's just, I don't know where these things come from.
But it's almost like you got a fascination for process improvement in a way, don't you?
Yeah. You can phrase it however you like. I've just been like that. Actually, when I look back on my career in the public service, I wasn't that inventive anyway. I was just trying to following procedures and stuff, and quite limited in my thinking. I look back now what I was doing. I would have, if I had my current personality and knowledge, and I was doing that kind of thing. Not that I go and work public service, of course. I would be the worst pain imaginable. I'd be telling all the people in charge, this is hopeless, this is inefficient, this isn't the right way to do it. This is, I wouldn't have gone well in the public service.
Now we'll move on to 1971. Now he started at University at La Trobe, doing sociology, which I found quite interesting because in the book here, I think Catherine interviewed a lot of people who just presumed you went to Melbourne University or something like that.
Yeah.
Where they were quite surprised.
I got in. I could have gotten to anything. My VCE was quite reasonable. I don't know. We don't do numbers in those days, but I got some pretty good marks. Yeah. I was totally clueless, as is the case throughout my life. Well, for example, I thought I want to understand what my purpose in going to university was to understand human society. I wanted to know why civilizations rise and particularly why they fall. So I thought, okay, what's the business, what's the field of study that deals with that? That's sociology. Must be social. It's the study of society. This is what I'm interested in doing. So, but the stupid thing about it was, first of all, I hadn't any idea what sociologists did. And I'd read a huge amount of history and stuff, but I knew nothing about sociology. And when I got to La Trobe and discovered what an absolute lot of codswallop and garbage this whole thing was, I just, these people haven't got a clue. There's nothing scientific and systematic. It's just bland ideology dressed up in fancy words. There's nothing a system about this at all. There's no evidence behind it. It's theory in the absence of any sort of data. I was absolutely horrified when I actually discovered what I'd done. What I hadn't also realised too is that there's a sort of thing. I probably would have gotten a lot better at Melbourne because I would have been more amongst people who were my peers, and I was just. It was just a really.
Was it very frustrating time, or?
Yeah, I got very negative actually. They do these things where you had to write a critique of a work of sociology, and I would just write the most scathing reviews of this thing, and I'm amazed they put up with me actually. I suppose you don't get expelled in those days, unlike today. If you say bad things about China, they'll kick you out of university. But in those days, they were very tolerant of me. So, I can remember. I don't know if it's in the book, but one of the my lecturers or tutors had actually put some remarks, comments on one of my pieces of writing, which I disagreed with. And I was making comments like the fact that Marx is wrong because empirically it doesn't work out. And he'd say something like, well, Marx isn't empirical, he's a dialectical. So to me, that made no sense. You have to think scientifically, you have to think of a theory and that fits the evidence. Because I was very influenced by physics that I studied in high school and that sort of thing. So you have to have a theory that fits the evidence and you test it. And sociology was nothing. There was nothing of that sort of thinking at all. So I remember going into this guy and just telling him at some length why he was completely and utterly wrong. and in a fairly forceful fashion. I mean politely. I don't swear or anything like that. But one of my friends went in afterwards and he said, "This guy looks shell shocked. Never heard anything like this."
Yeah, because there's quite a few parts here. I wrote like 3 or 4 points down here where you're not arguing with him, but you're having debates with him and stuff like that, and rocking up to the start of the year and saying, "I'm not going to come to your any lectures. Just do the essays, whatever it was."
Well, that was beginning my
your last year,
my third year. Yes, I just said I don't want to. Again, you see, they were very tolerant of me, which is nice. There's some great people there too, like Inga Clendenin, who was I think she was in Mesoamerican history. I used to go and talk to her and this kind of stuff. I think she appreciated my passion.
Well, they must have known. Well, that's probably the reason why they put up with you. They must have known, look, this bloke's real passionate, real smart about this sort of stuff. We're going to...
I was also pretty capable. You know, I knew a lot of stuff and I'd read very widely. Compared with the typical student in sociology or history, which I moved into pretty shortly, I was obviously pretty advanced sort of student. I remember in my first year economics, the lecturer, there was a professor there, said, you know, we want you to do honours and stuff because, you know, he could see that I had that drive and that ability that I was... I totally tactless. I think anybody who'd known me in those days, I had no sense. I still don't really. I still say stupid things all the time. But in those days, I was completely gormless in terms of saying anything to anybody without any sense of how it would come across.
That's quite a funny comment in there, which I think you might think it's awkward. But I think a lot of people make this mistake when there's a pregnant lady or something, or she wasn't pregnant.
No, she wasn't pregnant. That was the point. I just said, are you pregnant? She was most offended. But I mean, that's just... I often, I'm walking along with Lee or something and I go, "Ugh," like that. She says, "What are you doing?" I'm just, nothing. And I'm thinking about some stupid and embarrassing thing I might have done decades ago. And I just did so much dumb stuff.
I think a lot of people do that though. I don't think it's just only...
I think I do. No, Joel, I do more than most. I have no... There's nothing. Verbal diary just comes out. It's got no controls on it. I'm 1,000 times better than I used to be. You have no idea what I used to be like. At least says it all the time. You've got no sense of control. No sense of what people are going to think about what you say.
Well, during that time back at uni, I want to talk about now. I found something quite interesting because obviously from talking last week, your father was quite, your family did quite well, but you refused support from him totally, which is still probably the complete opposite. Most kids these days who go to uni, they expect their parents to pay for res, give them some money every week, get them a car, all that sort of stuff. So why during that time did you refuse financial support from your parents?
For one thing, it was easy. I had what in those days was called a Commonwealth Scholarship, so all my fees were paid.
Lucky man.
Yes.
No HECS debt. And
shortly after that, the Whitlam government got in anyway, because that was I went to university in 1971. So they cancelled the fees anyway. So I had no fees to pay. So all they had to do was to live, and frankly, but I was doing my gardening and stuff like that, and I applied as being. I had some savings from the year I was off work. I went in my gap year. So I just basically managed to work out a way to be independent. I didn't want to take money from my parents. That's all. I just wanted to be independent. There's a bit of a stiffness between me and my father, I suppose, but just that sense of pride. I would do things like, they'd offer to drive me to the swimming pool and stuff, and I'd say, no, I'll walk. And I'd walk quite long distances. I wouldn't ask anybody for a lift. Very, very independent from a quite young age. Just proud, stiff-necked, difficult, obnoxious,
But what I found quite interesting is in your first few months you stayed at Menzies College? You were there at Latrobe?
Yeah.
Menzies College. I had a cousin who stayed at Menzies College.
Yeah, room 670.
You remember the number as well?
670. Yeah. The guy down the road was he had 666, and they used to call it sex because of all the stuff that used to go on in his.
Well, I was just going to get onto that now. It was quite a very social time for you. You went to parties. You even drank a bit of booze. Didn't like it very much though.
No, yeah. I think in my whole life I've probably had alcoholic drinks about 15 times. It wouldn't have been much.
Well, do you look back following that time? Because you went from, it's probably a very social time. It's very, very free.
Well, I come from a one-sex school, so I only had boys. Except towards the end, I did school plays, and some of the girls from the local, the sister school were there, which was really quite amazing. So, and then in my gap year, there wasn't much either. So, because I was on a farm and I was, I wasn't much engaged with anybody. So all these girls were there. It was very exciting. It was very wonderful. So I went absolutely crazy for a while, really. Not crazy, not crazy in any absolute sense. Didn't actually, my first couple of terms of university, I didn't really do very much except just have a good time and did my basic work, but that was so easy. And just socialised. I remember there was a middle, the girls' wing. There was a girls' and boys' wings were separate. In the girls' wing there were 3 floors, and I knew every single one of the girls in the girls' wing. I just got to knock on their door and say hello. I just got the most social time in my whole life.
Yeah. So I want to go back to that. So it says you're visiting a lot. So what do you mean? You just went to knocked on the door and said hello?
Yeah, but people do that all the time. You just get to know people, and I was just oddly social in a way I've never been before or since.
Yeah, because I find that quite interesting. That's why I'm asking about it, because you clearly say a lot of the times you're not social or anything like that, but during this time you're the complete opposite.
But I like girls, you see. So it was always that way with me. When I'm single, I'm very interested in girls. It's just,
I think a lot of blokes are, so we can relate on that one.
My whole relationships change. If I'm happily married, my relationships tend to be male. I've got my life group, totally male. No women allowed. Let's just put on a fake beard.
Yeah,
so that to me suits me. But when I'm single, I'm just interested in girls. That was the thing. There was I think I mentioned Marilyn. I really liked.
Yes, you did. Yeah, the dairy farmer.
Farmer. So that was kind of. She was just one of the girls who lived on that floor, and she had a couple of friends that I knew very well. And I used to hang out a lot. I even tried to drink coffee actually, because that's all about all I had, but it was never liked it. It's just disgusting to me.
And during this time, I read as well, you had an afro and you walked around barefoot, which I found quite. I couldn't imagine. I was trying to picture in my head with you with an afro. There was a comment in here that you walked around the campus, had a bit of an afro, and it's barefoot. So it might be an incorrect comment from the look on your face. But I don't know.
No. I don't remember about the barefoot thing. I used to walk around in shirt and shorts in the middle of winter, and
really?
I just run outside. So I don't think I was barefoot. I don't remember about that part. But certainly, I had an afro. I just let my hair go. It became very, very frizzy. We didn't know it now because there's virtually nothing left, but it was just sort of very frizzy. And so I used to actually have a headband, like a yellowy headband, but put around it so I would look very different ever.
Did you have a big beard at that time then, or no beard?
No beard.
No beard.
No beard. No, I was just with this young kid with his afro sort of thing.
And I found it quite interesting as well, because the greeting stuff, it's just interesting, because you obviously you quite often say it's hard. You've had to learn over the years to do various greetings and stuff like that. And whereas with this time, you just naturally really social, gravitated towards it, and it sort of you had a great time. Was that something that persisted for the remaining time of uni, or was it something that died off a bit, or?
Oh no, it died.
Yeah,
it died very fast. It was just those first 2 terms, and then this girl that I liked, Marilyn, got herself a boyfriend, and that just completely crushed me. So
So you sort of went back in sort of a bit of depression or something like that. I think you're saying in here.
Yeah, I had a terrible 2 weeks when I was just sitting there thinking I should smash up the furniture or something like that. Just I couldn't feel any worse. It was just awful. And then I think I described what happened, didn't I? I had these ideas that had been floating around in my mind, and I just started to write them down. And I wrote this idea called social energy. Very completely nothing about it is what I would agree with now. Nothing at all. But it was just my first systematic attempt to think about society and how it could work and what could happen and so forth. And then I showed it to, there was this elderly academic who was actually living on top of Menzies College. And he had this vast library, but they said they left him there because they gave him this free flat because he would will his library to the university when he died. But there was a few of us there, and I used to visit him. And I showed him this thing, and I can't remember what he said about it actually, but that was the beginning of my way of thinking, and what I was then doing. So it was, and shortly after I got my first really serious girlfriend too. So that obviously changed my social. But I started really focusing on these ideas, and then as I was doing history, I would apply historical reasoning and look at fluctuations, particularly demographic, because I was always in biology too. It wasn't just history; it was by history. Well, I realised that history had the evidence that sociology didn't. So that's why history was obviously interest to me. And I was interested in because I had this biological viewpoint, I was also interested in demography, population growth, birth rates, death rates, those kind of things too, because they were sort of scientific and objective, and you could see certain kinds of patterns, and there's certain kinds of behaviour that correlates with, like in 18th century Japan, where the demographic and the social things and the political systems correlate with each other. So I looked at these and used this to develop this very primitive ideas. So I became very Yeah, cut my hair short. Became known as a narc. I think.
Yeah, I had that written down right here because I think that's quite funny. Yeah, some girls thought you were a narc because
Well,
yeah,
because Menzies College was pretty. We're talking about a sort of a third level university, and it was very lefty.
apologies to anyone at Latrobe.
What's that?
Apologies to anyone who goes to Latrobe. I've been out to Menzies College. I had a cousin who did a couple of terms there.
Well, it's just not where you get the most rigorously academic people amongst the students, I suppose you'd say. They were a sort of fun-loving crowd. I think I remember this girl said to me, "Hey, Jim, you don't drink and you don't smoke and you don't take dope and you don't have sex. What's that enjoy in life? Why don't you want to be happy?" And I just thinking, well, if that's all you've got in life, how can you be happy? Because it just didn't make any sense.
Because that comment's quite important because that's in the book. It's associated with then your philosophy on life, right? So that's the blurb which is under it, and you say there's three aspects linked to happiness, which is community, purpose, and relationships. Was that thinking developed around that time, or why was that?
I just knew you had to live for a purpose.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine a life just lived to be enjoying. Now maybe I come close to that in my first 2 years, first two terms, but I just had to live for something. I had to have a meaning and purpose to my life. I had to have a direction. I had to achieve something, not financially or anything, just in terms of something worthwhile. I had no sense, of course, of becoming wealthy or anything. Just didn't cross my mind.
So can I talk about that though? Because your philosophy in life, you said that you point out that the three aspects is it's obviously not money, but you say I think it's community, purpose, and relationships in that order. So
No, I don't say that order.
Okay, so there was 1, 2, 3 things mentioned, which was community, purpose, and relationships.
Well, to me, purpose comes first.
Right.
It's the reason you live. I live for a purpose. My purpose is defined in terms of my research project, first of all, my family, and Jim's. Looking after my people and my tribe. That's kind of purpose is first of all. But when you're talking about happiness, I mean, if you gave me a choice, are you going to live a purposeful, productive life but be unhappy, or a life without purpose and be happy? If that was possible, I'd choose the first without hesitation, because it just isn't. Being happy isn't important in itself. It's a product of doing the right thing, not a reason for doing it.
Okay, so during that time at uni, so uni's done, you had an honours year, and in the honours year, during this whole time, you're still doing a bit of gardening and mowing on the side?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. What happened was that I was just doing my $1.50 an hour gardening. I had kept 2 of my clients, and then after a while, I thought I'd try and go for broke and see if I could earn more. And so I put it down. I raised my rate to $3 an hour, and I had raised it to $2 an hour. And then I raised it to $3 an hour, and then I put some leaflets out, and then people were in these little yellow. I got these little yellow strips done in the university union there. I just mass printed it and cut them up and put these little things with $3 an hour, and people just, this is so cheap. I was stunned at that. I thought, wow, this is something I can earn a lot more money than this. And then after that, I just drive about the car.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that because at the time you were cycling to people's houses still and using their mower, right? Was that during that time?
Yeah, I wasn't actually mowing the lawns, but I was mostly just gardening. But I was cycling, using their stuff.
So you're cycling to their house, and after a while, you thought, the Kingswood. So you went and get a loan for the Kingswood because you thought it would help you with the business and girls as well.
No, I thought it would help me with the girls. The business.
Only the girls. Enough business and nothing to do with it.
Purely to do with the girls.
So buying a car to impress the girls.
Trying to. I thought
most blokes try and do sometimes.
This was after I had my girlfriend, which was that was for 18 months. That was a very serious relationship, but just But then after that, I was very lonely and down after that. Still working away, and so I thought maybe I'd be more impressive to girls if I had a car. So that's why I wanted to buy a car, and basically, I thought if I can to pay for the car, because I got a loan from the bank. There's a branch of the bank in the university, so I got a loan from the bank to pay off the car. I thought I'd better try and make a bit of money. So I thought then, okay, what if I charged by the job? So I thought most lawns $5, which when you're charging me $3 an hour to do a lawn for $5, which is half an hour's work, sounded pretty good to me. You know, you could make $10 an hour, which was huge. But bear in mind, in those days you could buy a house for $30,000, so it's, you know, in proportion. So that was good. So I used to, and then because of course I had the car, I got a trailer and an old mower, and not an old mower, it's a new mower, but just a basic mower, and I just started an edging wheel and stuff, and I just started charging $5 an hour, and I didn't find it difficult to get. I mostly used leaflets in those days, just around the neighbourhood, and paid surprisingly well. So it was not difficult for me to not only support myself but also to save up some money.
What colour was the Kingswood? How long did you have it for?
Well, it was white originally, but it got very grubby because I never washed it.
And you're telling me, I think you said last week on Ask Jim that you actually ripped out the back seats to get more rubbish into it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't, which probably explains why we didn't do very well with girls anyway, but I found that was a hopeless task. Yeah, it was just an old car. I still had that well into my full-time years, so I must have owned that car for, you know, close to 10 years or about that time. By which time it was second-hand in the beginning. It wasn't worth very much. I think it cost me about $1,600, something of that nature.
Yeah, I think it was $1,600. Yeah.
And eventually, I just junked it because it was just completely battered and worn out and decrepit. But I always think old cars are a great deal. You know, I used to look at what the RACV said it cost you to run a car, and all the depreciation, the interest, and the insurance, and all the rest of it. It cost me almost nothing to run a car because it's got no value. It doesn't depreciate. You don't have to insure it except against damage to other people. So it's a cheap thing to have.
Now we'll talk about it as well. You did mention quickly the trailer on the mower, but the mower you bought was around $200, and you were quoted in the book saying it was the scariest business decision of your career at the time. Why was that?
Well, it was a lot of money. You got to understand, I'm making $3 an hour, so at my gardening. So the idea I could make $10 an hour was pretty exciting, but then to have to go out and spend $200 and buy a lawnmower was a lot. So it was.
What mower was it? What type? Can you remember?
It was a Pope.
A Pope.
Orange. Bright orange.
Bright orange Pope. Yeah.
That's right. So, yeah, it's kind of surprising to me. You know, I undervalued myself. I didn't understand how, because I by that time I'd been doing things for a while, and I had this kind of perfectionism, this wanting to do things really, really well. So I get that stood me quite well. But it was odd that I could make so much money. I was surprised people would pay so much to get their lawns mowed. What
was the comparative rates? Did you know anyone else rates in the area at that time,
no,
or do you have nothing to compare to?
I did no market research at all. That's why I ended up charging so little for so long. I had no idea. When I did this $3 an hour thing, I thought, oh, go for broke. People were like, oh, you're so cheap. I'm cheap. $3 an hour. That's 50% of what I was charging beforehand. And they still think it's cheap, which is what gave me the idea of mowing lawns. But it was.
Because we'll touch on this again, because something you were doing just this time in the book as well, which makes sense, was during that time you're always looking at how to improve your work in terms of the lines, the grass, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. That during that time is when you applied all that stuff, what you were saying before, right to your work. You get you quicker, faster.
I always did, yeah. I always had the attitude that whatever I do, I try and do it efficiently and well, and that obviously developed in my mowing business. And I was always trying to just do it quicker and better. It's got to be clean. I just had to be perfect. I just had this unreasonable obsession. I never even thought about it in terms of clients. It wasn't really so much if I do a better job, I'll get more clients or they'll stay with me or I can charge more. I never thought that way. I just thought I have to do it well. It's the Mr. Tapley thing. It just has to be the best job I can do in the quickest time. No matter what I did, I always wanted to think that.
What are some tips you can maybe give to someone real quickly about that time? What were some things that you can still remember from that time ago? What were some things that you were doing?
Well, you do the job well for the sake of the job. You just aim to amaze and delight the client. That's really the biggest single thing. People put money first. That's the big danger. They think how can I maximize my income? It's not the wrong question. How can you maximize your satisfaction of your customers and make them really delighted with you? And if you do that, you will work out a way to make money from it. But if you don't have that attitude, then you can't. And that's the thing, because I was charging too little. I didn't even know. But what I discovered was that I found it incredibly easy to find work and incredibly easy to keep clients. And people would refer me. I just kept on getting more and more work. And as I gradually put my prices up, I had no problem. I just got more and more money, far more than I could ever dream possible. I had no comprehension. I mean, jeepers creepers, if I'd have known how much money you could make mowing lawns, I would have gone into it in my gap year and made a fortune. I mean, I just didn't know.
And during this time as well, not only the approach just to satisfying the customer, but one quote that stood out to me was you're saying, I think in your 20 years of doing it, you didn't turn up for a job only twice that you could recall, which I think is quite astounding. In 20 years of all those clients, then twice you didn't rock up.
I can remember I made a mistake in her books, and I felt so terrible, really anguished, guilty to let my client down. It's an extreme emotional reaction that I have to poor service. It's just beyond reason.
And this forms part of our complaint system, or your complaint system to this day, which didn't turn up. Obviously, is one of the categories for the client.
I go through complaints every day. It's one of my major jobs. I go through all the low-ranked surveys and look at what happened and why, and then I communicate with the franchisee. Why did this happen? What could we do about it? And that's what makes me think of software and so forth and better systems and stuff. It drives me all the time. Though today I apply that as much to franchisees as I do. Why are my franchisees not happy? What can I make them delighted? It's just it's a deep-seated emotional driver for me, and it's totally beyond money. Money comes out of it. That's good, but always the service comes first, which is, I think, it's a good attitude. I find the people who are best at something, they're best because they love what they do, like yourself. Like you have this passion for social media and for marketing. You just do it because you love it, and I can tell that, which is why you do well at gyms. Whereas somebody who comes in who just wants to make a lot of money doesn't tend to do nearly as well.
I want to touch on about now with the end of the honours. So the honours is done. I'm trying to skip ahead here, but the end of your honours. But you had enough clients to sell around, which is quite pivotal because we have things in gyms called splits, which is a bunch of clients you can sell. But was the first time you sold around? How did that come about? How'd you work that up?
Well, I just knew from in the age newspaper they had these classified sections, and I got the idea of selling a business. And because I was so good at finding clients, you see, and happy clients and stuff, which was a bit difficult emotionally because your clients got to become your friends, so that was a bit tough.
Yeah, how'd that go with that? Because that's quite an interesting point for something there. So, because you do get quite attached, people get quite attached to their clients. So, how did you go after transitioning them off to someone else?
Well, no, I just used to do it. It was a matter of business, and I'm supporting myself completely, and I knew I was going to have a long PhD, so I needed some money and I did it, and it wasn't difficult. I just put an advertisement in. Somebody came up and I sold the business to them.
And you used part of that money with some more money to buy your first house as well.
Yeah, a house in Eltham, $33,000, just down the road from the pub. Yeah, I got a small inheritance from my grandparents, but mostly it was my lawn mowing money, and of course that got the deposit, and then I just paid for it. I was very close with money. Always have been actually. I'm very reckless in business, but in personal spending, I'm extremely scungy. So it was not difficult for me to save money because I've got this business that I'm doing well, that I'm making pretty good money for a student. Just weekends and stuff. That was all. And then I sold this business and I had all this cash, so I got and bought a house, which wasn't that difficult really.
How much per week as a student were you making back then? Just so I can try to project it for inflation. What would it be worth in today's dollars? Well,
I don't know. As I said, even from the beginning, I was making probably close to about $10 an hour because you could make.
And you're doing 8-hour days, or what were you doing 4-hour days, or what were you doing back then?
I don't even remember. But when you live on so little, as I did, it mounts up quite fast. I don't drink. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. Didn't take drugs. Didn't have a girlfriend. So what do you do with your money? I can remember used to go to the local market and I'd just buy the cheapest possible price of everything. I was just always naturally very, very close with personal spending.
And you still do that, don't you? So you would go for a home brand or the generic brand over.
Yeah. I find it quite offensive to buy anything but a home brand. I'll go into a shop and I'll look for toothpaste. If they don't have a home brand, I won't buy it.
Really? You're Black and Gold. Well, if Black and Gold are home brands watching, give a sponsorship to Jim. He's your poster boy for it. So what I was going to say, at your house as well, you were known for having barbecues all the time. I know you love barbecues still to this day, but I think it was someone you used to go out with a beanbag. I don't know. They said a beanbag in the book, but even when it was raining, you used to cook outside all the time.
Yeah, I put the beanbag was waterproof. I put it over my head, and I'd cook the barbecue. Every night I'd have a barbecue. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just in my place at Eltham, I had this big. It's quite a big block actually because it's only a very small house, and there was a trench underneath my barbecue, which was the same sort of brick thing that my father used to do. His was concrete, and mine always just piled up bricks and got across the top. And I used to love cooking on a barbecue. I love the outdoors. And even at night in the rain, I would be out with my barbecue. Yes, it was.
And you still do it, don't you, at your home?
Yeah, well, not usually.
Not in the rain, but in the.
Oh yeah, I still had barbecues with my son actually. During the lockdown, we had barbecues a bit every day.
What's your specialty?
Well, actually, these days I'm mainly vegetarian, but we have there's the only thing I really love on the barbecue is little schnitzels you get from Woolworths, pepper schnitzels, but you've got a 4-star rating, so they're quite healthy. So I have one of those and a slice of bread and tomatoes and corn, roasted corn and a bit of fruit and stuff. So it's it's reasonably healthy, I suppose.
And you like the wood fire one? You don't have a gas one or anything? It's
never,
a fire one.
Never gas. The taste is quite different. I used to have my staff across one time to have barbecue in my front yard, and they put a gas cooker on, and then I was cooking because they thought we wouldn't have enough, and I was cooking there, and people tasted it. They said, there's no comparison. This stuff on the fire is so much better.
Mm. It's a big industry now, the barbecues. There's TV shows that they're called Grill Masters and stuff like that in America. They have massive festivals here. If you're ever interested in that sort of stuff.
Well, my barbecuing is very primitive. It's always got to be wood. It's got to be open flame. But you got
the smoke.
You got to have the smoke getting into it.
Flavour.
It's just the taste is ambrosia. To me, there's nothing better than a nice barbecue. Very, very simple. But just the atmosphere. Just the outdoors. Love the outdours.
Mm. And we'll touch on now as well. So that was during so you were doing your honours when you had the house? Did you buy the house when you were just about to start your honours, or was that?
I don't remember when I exactly bought it.
Yeah. So does that house still exist? Have you ever driven past it since, or?
I don't know, 90 Pitt Street, look if you like.
90 Pitt Street, there we go. Down the road from the pub. So after your honours, you embarked on your PhD in history. So that was a quite exciting time for you. I know we were just talking before about the lovely lady who helped you out with that.
Well, Jude Phillip was good. I knew her in my third year, and then when I wanted to go to honours, she said, "Jim, you can, but you can't do what you did last year. You've got to actually attend the courses. This is a condition." I said, "All right, okay. Well, I will come and do."
Yeah.
I will come and do the
lectures. Yeah.
I will come and I don't know what they were lectures, but you had to do I had to follow the coursework properly, like I did do in the previous year. But June, she was good. She's a lovely lady, and when I got to the end of I had this honours thesis, which was, by that time I'd been developing it quite a lot in terms of looking at different periods of history and applying every study I did. I actually applied the lessons to this research, and I just gradually changed the thing. So I got this for an honours thesis, it went for about double what it should have, because I put an appendix on because I had to put it all in, and they said it's just like, without the appendix, this thing makes no sense. But of course, I just had to do it. You're only at a certain length, so I had an appendix which was almost as long. Like they complained that it was without the appendix, it made no sense. But then I couldn't have put it all into the main thing; it was too big. So, and then June said they said to me actually, well, look, if you want to do your PhD, you really should stay here because you'll get more latitude than you would at another university. They're not going to let you do your own thing like you have here, which was probably pretty sensible. I mean, I don't dark on the Trove. They were very tolerant of this very weirdly, wildly unorthodox thinker who was zero personal skills. So I would tell anybody anything, exactly what I thought of them. Not rudely, but academics, professors. I always used to say, I couldn't comprehend how other people think. They're so governed by who thinks something. I said, I don't care if there's a room full of professors telling me that I'm wrong. If you can't tell me the reason that I'm wrong, I'm not interested. But if a 10-year-old kid comes up and said, okay, here's some evidence that shows that you're wrong because it doesn't fit your theory, then I'm interested. I don't understand how people think differently to that. Mm. So, as I said, I was wildly unorthodox. My thinking was already completely out of the academic mainstream, especially for a history degree. It was just nowhere near what anybody else was doing. And they just advised me, you better stay here. So I just did. I didn't even consider anywhere else really. But they were good, and there were some lovely people there. People like June, she was wonderful, and get Clendon. People who were, I used to go and talk to academics at times, and I don't want to be down on my old university. I've got a lot of.
Has La Trobe ever because I know a lot of universities do inspiring alumni type of stuff. Have they ever approached you or anything like that?
No.
Well, if you are watching Latrobe, Jim went to Latrobe. He's giving you some kind words.
I don't know. I think my particular version of understanding academia might upset a lot of people, especially on the left these days. It's very empirical rather than ideologically driven.
But what was your reaction? What was the reaction for your PhD during the time? What did people think about your ideas, especially the academics? What did they think about it?
Well, they didn't comprehend them.
They didn't comprehend them, right?
June was...
Even when you showed evidence, or even you showed the thinking behind the process, or they couldn't comprehend it still?
It's just not the way people think in history departments. In history doesn't work that way. History is okay, what did the Second World War take place? Here's about 6 plausible reasons, and here's the evidence for them. And therefore that's the reason for the First War. Now, First World War, here's all kinds of reasons, here's the evidence for them, and then they do a plausible narrative, and they go and look at the research, and they go into the primary sources and stuff, and work out what actually happened and who said what and this kind of thing. So it's a very... I'm not decrying it. It's important because all my own research was built on that kind of thinking, but it's not the way I think about things. What I was thinking about, what's in common? The Chinese Han Dynasty collapsed towards the second century AD. The Roman Empire collapsed. Why? What's the commonality? What have they got in common? Why do populations rise in certain periods and drop in others? Why does the birth rate change the way it does? What's in common? Why did the birth rate drop in the 15th century or 14th century and also drop again in the late 17th century? What's the common pattern? And what theory can you have that covers all of history? So I wasn't just interested in one period. I wanted to know, like I was always interested in the broader variety of things, like East Asian, ancient history, pre-Columbian American. I wanted the biggest, because I wanted something that would apply to all of history, where historians don't think that way. They think, I'm going to explain the Second World War. But I want to understand war itself. Why do wars take place? And then look at patterns. Why do so many wars take place, pairs of wars take place about a generation apart? It happens again and again. Chinese history, First and Second World War, it's again and again. And why does that happen? And asking these questions and trying to find a theory that explained everything. Not just why the Roman Empire collapsed, but why the Eastern Roman Empire didn't collapse. That was fascinating to me. What's the difference? If it's all to do with politics and economics, what's the difference? Why would there be such a huge difference? Why one goes down in 410 or thereabouts, and the other one lasts till 1453? Well, what's the difference? So that kind of thinking is incredibly alien to somebody who's a historian. It's like you're speaking Sanskrit to them. They just can't think in those terms. And June was wonderful, and she would try and give me some guidance, but it was totally outside of her mental universe. She's the loveliest lady, she really was, but she just couldn't really... Not that you couldn't grasp it, there's nothing complicated in the way, I didn't like, complicated words or massive equations. It was just the way of thinking was so unhistorical.
And do you find that, let's skip forward to the present, do you find that to this day, obviously you've got a lot of interest in this, in biohistory now, I know you've been approached to do talks and stuff like that. Do you find it just takes time for something like an idea like that to sort of get absorbed over time, and then it's sort of...
Most people can't think in those terms. Look, okay, in my view, my research is world-breaking. It's an intellectual breakthrough which completely changed the world. I mean, you look at things like problems of poverty and stuff like that. I mean, I could tell you what you're supposed to do to cure poverty, and it would be a rounding error on the aid budget. It would be incredibly simple. You just have to look at the epigenetics of human behaviour and motivation, and you do something like a vaccination program, mental illness, all these kinds of issues that are so big, crime, drug addiction, all these things. There's really simple. So it's completely revolutionary, weird thinking, and things like learning cycles, which when you look at them are so obvious. You see these cycles all through European history, Chinese history. They've got all these points in common. It's so obvious to me. So why isn't it obvious to anybody else? Why doesn't anybody? Because people just can't think that way. Because their minds, when it comes to physics or chemistry, it's out there somehow. You can think about it objectively and clearly. When it comes to human society, we're so embedded in it. Most people cannot think outside normal ways of looking at things. They just can't do it. It's just unnatural. Now, very few people can pick it up and they love it. My son, Andrew, fortunately, praise God, is one of them. And there's other people who can. The people who come from a scientific background tend to find it somewhat easier because they're used to thinking in terms of... I remember I showed a draft of my book to Professor Parolini, who was doing the research work in those days. He said, this makes sense. It was very matter of fact because he's used to thinking in terms of evolutionary biology. So this is evolutionary biology applied to history. Yeah, of course it should work that way. But people who are involved in sociology, history, so-called social sciences, which are nothing scientific about them, they just can't think in those terms. It's difficult. You've got to sort of lift yourself out of your mind. And it's easy for me because I'm a total maverick. I just naturally think different to everybody else in everything.
Well, you had a couple of interviews. You had one interview with that Stephen bloke who had like 100,000 views, which shows people are, over time, it's sort of, it still keeps going and keeps going slowly. People are getting absorbed with the content.
There are people who accept it. It tends to fit better with a more right wing sort of viewpoint,
right?
Because it's less. I don't know. I wouldn't say they're less ideological. I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as particularly right-wing in practice, but people who think in those terms tend to be more able to understand what I'm talking about. Because you're talking about things like the decline of the West. Well, to a person with a right-wing viewpoint, that kind of makes emotional sense. Whereas to a person with a left-wing viewpoint, they say, well, no, they just can't think in those terms.
I get you. And during that time as well, was that when because you're a militant atheist as well, up until, I think, late-ish 20s maybe? Or
27.
27, yeah. So were you at university still then at the time doing that?
Yeah.
Because it was these ideas which then not force you, but you sort of then changed your thinking, right? You went from being a militant atheist
I started off being very, very lefty, like all in favour of sex being free and all the rest of it. I didn't actually act that way very much because I was too introverted and nerdy and socially awkward and the rest of it. And when I started researching and looking at the reasons for the collapse of civilizations and what caused civilization to rise and prosper and stuff, I recognised that traditional thinking, but Christian, Jewish values, whatever, actually have a lot of point to them because they change character in a way that creates the temperament that allows civilizations to flourish.
So when you were looking at the material, that was the evidence that you needed to then change. So you used that as evidence to change your belief.
Yeah. Look, it's interesting stuff too. There's a lot of things around, like the Kinsey report, which is very interesting to me. This is written in the late 40s about these large-scale surveys. And Alfred Kinsey was somebody who basically believed sex was the more the better. But there was statistics in there that said something completely different. One of the most interesting ones, it says that the single best predictor of whether you're going to be successful in life is how many nocturnal emissions you have as a teenager. Now, he didn't put it that way.
Right.
He just put it as a correlation. But there was a massive, massive, massive correlation. The more nocturnal emissions you have, the more likely you are to go further education, the more money you're going to make. Very powerful correlations, which I put in my books. And that was kind of, people say, well, no, the whole thing about sex is just do everything you like. Of course you should. But that's not what... And Kinsey's the guy who wrote the book on why the sex revolution should happen. But his own statistics actually said the opposite. They said there's a point to this. So it was from that kind of evidence that I was looking at. And what I tend to do when I read a book, most people when they read a book, they tend to look at the viewpoint of the writer and as the first thing. I just looked at the evidence. And I would often completely write out the view of the writer. Margaret Mead's another example too. I love Margaret Mead because of the way that she describes societies. And books like Sex and Temperament and Three Primitive Societies and Coming of Age in New Guinea are fantastic sources, and they were a source of a lot of my thinking in the early days. But I have no agreement at all with the way Margaret Mead thinks about these things and her interpretation of them. I took her evidence and just completely cast aside, almost unaware of what she thinks. So that's just the way my mind works. I look for the evidence. I'm not interested in your theory. I want to know what's the evidence for your theory. And if the evidence doesn't fit your theory, garbage. Go for the evidence.
Yeah, it's quite a formative time because let's say your mid to late 20s. That's when the whole passion, it's the biohistory. That's where it's all formulating. You're getting your ideas down in a form, and that's sort of what's driven you moving forward for the next until where you are this day. So I think it's a quite important chapter in the book, so I recommend anyone to read it. So we'll leave it there for this week, Jim. The Accidental Daniel Garden, lot to unpack there. So make sure you subscribe, and obviously every Wednesday night we have Ask Jim as well, where you can ask him any question you'd like to know. hopefully we can get a few of these copies to get you to sign and sell online as well. We're trying to do that. You can also get every customer a raving fan for free, which you can actually download it on our website for free, which is an audio book. Or you can actually get a signed version as well if you want for a small fee. So thanks for that, Jim. We'll leave that there for this week.
All right.